Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Sadaqallahu al-azim. Dear listeners, friends, students, audience, my peers, mentors, before I formally start the lecture of the day, which is on authentic leadership, I will recite few verses from the Holy Quran, and I think that would make a very good preamble to this presentation also. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Quran Kareem, the holy book, the last of the holy books, has said, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa unsa, وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم صدق الله العظيم. O mankind, I have made you from one man, Adam, and from one woman, Eve. And then I made groups and tribes and sub-tribes of you so that you can recognize and identify each other. But verily, the most nearest to the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the omnipotent, the God, is one who is the most feared. That means that one who will always commit good deeds and righteousness in the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I was reading the background of this authentic leadership, it was certainly a very interesting discourse that how the leaders need to be authentic, their character has to be above board, and the trust of the people within in the credibility and personality of the leaders is certainly very important. When I'm recording this lecture, the federal government of the President of the Prime Minister Imran Khan has just disclosed an inquiry which was held by the Joint Investigation Commission or Committee, mainly to expose the forces and the persons who have been involved in creating the price hike of sugar in the last 6 months, and which created a big bad name for the government. Apart from the political affiliation, since I'm a professor and I would not like to comment on the political affiliations, but the more important thing is that the inquiry has exposed some very prominent personalities of the government. And the question comes that whether leadership without authentic character, authentic actions can be something which can bring the change in the society towards the common goals. This theory was as a consequence of many developments, like when we had the 9/11, and you see that 9/11 could lead to the situation much economic crisis, and there has been a lot of warlike situation throughout the world. So within this crisis-like situation, some of the financial tycoons and some of the financial firms could take the benefit of the crisis and Later on, the governments and the investigation also exposed these firms. And these firms, as a matter of fact, did a lot, plundered the money of the people, the stakeholders, the shareholders, through falsification of the information and to create havoc in the organizations and then playing the dirty businesses and try to squeeze money from the crisis and the situation in which the people were faced with. So later on, you see in the world, we could also see the Panama Leaks, in which a large number of the politicians, bureaucrats, judicial leaders, and even the financial leaders were exposed across the country who could invest their illegitimate money in the offshore companies in places like Panama, which were basically a fictitious companies were established to raise the money and then transfer this money the uh, to the offshore companies and then utilize that money for their use in different words and then transferring that money from the offshore accounts to the different places where they were living. And we could see when in Pakistan there had been a long list, and many people, including the prime minister, was uh, punished out of that crisis, out of that leaks. So this really posed a question that why the authenticity of the actions of the leaders and their personal attributes is very important. So towards the end of the first decade, this theory of authentic leadership was scanned, which is still in its embryonic stage. And we will see that there is a very little research available, but of course, there is very good convincing power in this leadership theory. Okay, so the we discussed that companies like WorldCom, Enron, and massive failures in the banking industry have all created fear and uncertainty. People feel apprehensive and insecure about what is going on around them. And as a result, they long for bona fide leadership they can trust, and for leaders who have honest and good. People's demand for trustworthy leadership make the study of authentic leadership timely and worthwhile. So, some of the people may think that this is maybe a new version of the traitist theory because the traitist theory mostly emphasizes the personal attributes. But let us see. I remember when I visited Dubai, UAE, back in 2009 or 10, there has been a complete chaos due to the economic recession, and almost everything was closed down. There was no construction activities going. There were a lot of firms were bankrupted, and I could see thousands of the car people left behind at the airports. And the biggest onus of this crisis of the economic recession was taken by the real estate and security markets. But I think when I visited again the Dubai in 2013 or 14, I remember that there has been a lot of improvement, and the Dubai government and the UAE government could learn a lot of good things from their mistakes, and that was, I think, one of the time when I could see second time that they had again the construction industry was boosted, and very stringent rules were formulated so that the investment of the people can be assured. Now, the when we think about the authenticity of an individual as a leader, there can be three perspectives. The first is interpersonal, that how within himself, how as a human being and as a leader, how does the leader who has to be authentic would look like? For example, is self-knowledge, is awareness, self-regulations, emotional intelligence, uh, cognitive intelligence, so intelligence quotient, emotional quotient, and all these are really very important for the authentic leaders. The second is interpersonal relations, that how he would like to deal and how he would deal with the people, with the team and the team members around. It's really very important. And the third perspective is that how he would be developing the people around him, because you see that it is not all the time possible that you have the team of the capacity you believe you need. There might be situations in which you would come across the people who have very little capacity, but certainly if you are having a very good interpersonal communication and relation, then definitely you can develop them for the challenge. Now, this is the model and this was proposed by Bill George, who was famous proponent of the authentic leadership. And if you look at he has given five uh, characteristics. The first is that there will be a purpose, very clear purpose. Why does he would like to lead, and what is the common goals to which he would like to lead the organization? Then there is a strong values of right things to do, that he would never use anything which is against the principle of rightness. For instance, if I just recall again, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to go to give any political affiliation again, I'm clearing time it again, that we just, I could listen to Imran Khan last day, that while emphasizing and commenting on the outcomes of this sugar inquiry, he categorically said that we will do the justice and we will take it to the logical end. And I think this is the value system which the leaders would become, the real leaders, authentic leaders. So the values, for example, an authentic leader would always believe in merit, justice, equality, empowerment, and he would not be uh, influenced by the unfair means, red tapeism, and many other things which normally play in the hierarchies. Thirdly, it while he is having a clear purpose and he is having a strong value system, then he will be having a very trusting relationship. This is really very important, because if your team members believe in you, in the sense that what you profess, what you propose, certainly they would be going with you. So you need to make them understand, and for that, definitely your personal values and character is really very important. Fourthly, self-discipline, and this is the art of self-governance and self-discipline. That while we are dispensing the leadership, and while believing the values we have acquired and we have developed, we have to be very disciplined in taking the decisions. And finally, they are highly passionate. The purpose is very clear, and they are passionate. They were never yielding. They would work from their heart, and all the time they would be convinced that they would be achieving these goals. So we can again come to the example of Nobel Prize laureate Nelson Mandela, who was deeply moral man with strong conscience. While fighting to abolish the apartheid, that was basically a kind of system in which the blacks were subjected by the whites in South Africa. And certainly we remember that Nelson Mandela, I think the people who are of my age, 50 plus, they would recall that there has been a very black age in the South Africa when the whites were really ruling the blacks, and the blacks were treated mostly like slave, and that was apartheid. That the blacks were subjected and subjugated in all walks of life. So Nelson Mandela, basically, based on his very clear thoughts, high passion, high purpose, good credibility, then appeared as a leader against the apartheid, and then he was unyielding in his pursuit of justice and equality for all. When he saw he was in prison, he was offered early release in exchange for denouncing his viewpoint, but he chose to remain imprisoned rather than compromise in position. And this is where the authentic leadership would never succumb to the pressures. they would always believe and demonstrate the value system which they would be acquiring and which they would be believing. And that is where the passionate and the purposeful life would come. Nelson Mandela knew that who he was at his core. He knew his values, his leadership reflected those values. So, certainly, a clear understanding of the values which you profess, which you take forward. I skip this, I think. Now, the interest in authentic leadership increased during time in which there was a great deal of societal upheaval and instability in the United States. I already discussed it that after 9/11, there was a widespread corporate corruption across the country that troubled the economy, and many people then tried to take benefit of this situation. So, the 9/11 widespread corporate corruptions and a troubled economy all created a sense of uncertainty and anxiety in the people about leadership. So, this was definitely a place where a stage where the people were really looking at their leaders, but at the same time they had high concerns about the leaders. A major challenge confronting researcher and developing a theory was to define the construct and identify characteristics. So this was really one of the challenge that how to do we have the same wine of trade theory in the new bottle or in the new glass, or we are developing some new kind of thinking. So Walumba and others in 2008 defined authentic leader as a pattern of leader behavior that draws upon and promotes positive psychological capacity and a positive ethical climate to foster greater self-awareness and internalize moral perspective, balanced processing of information, and in relationship transparency on the part of leader working with followers, fostering positive self-development. So we will discuss all these 5 or 6 components which were discussed in the early work of Ulambawa. So this is just giving the same model which was proposed by uh, the the Leibniz and others in 2003, that positive psychological capacity, number one, moral reasoning, number two. That positive psychological capacities are really very important. Your self-governance, self-awareness, and using your own emotional emotions and sentiment in a very positive way is very important. And then moral reasoning, that why it is important to create a value system, and why it is important to develop the people. And then definitely there are some critical life events. For example, we had the apartheid, and then we had the 9/11 events. We have the economic recession in 2007 and 8, and now I think the bigger crisis and recession, maybe the depression, economic depression, is expecting once this corona virus and COVID-19 is over. And we can have the same kind of questions again, and how the authentic leadership can be one of the best way to take the nations, the world out of this crisis. There is a lot of debate, and I could also see one of the video from an American doctor. It's basically Indian, and that doctor who is an MIT graduate, and then he is American and having a caste, the lowest caste of the Indian caste system, the untouchable people of the society, and then he raised to a very prestigious organization, and he's also now competing for the Senate election 2020 in the United States. And his uh, clear message over this corona is that over the years, the big pharma companies through the vaccination process have been creating a business of billions of dollars for themselves. It is at the same time killing of the immune power of the people. Instead of developing their immune power, they have created the vaccination is the solution against these epidemics. And through the sustainable development goals, also he has tried to influence and convince the people that this vaccination and development of vaccine is basically a pharma mafia which would try to sell their businesses in the times to come. So this is definitely is a question whether Dr. Shiva is right or not. It's a question which I would leave to the time. Now, these critical life events are very important to become authentic leaders, and definitely when the nations and the societies are crossing through the critical life events, then you would come to know about the people who are authentic or otherwise. Now, when we come to the personal attributes, he will have or she will have self-awareness, internalized moral perspective, balance processing in relationship, transparency. We will discuss this, and this together will make the authentic leadership. This is the model we will discuss. Now, the self-awareness we already discussed it that it is the basically the awareness of oneself about his or her strengths and weaknesses. And uh, there is a famous Islamic quotation that man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu. A person who has understood his own self is basically realized about the God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So self-awareness basically is your insight into yourself so that you can see that what are your strengths and weaknesses and how can you improve your strengths further and how can you marginalize or you can control your weaknesses. And definitely your self-awareness would create Iqbal I think Iqbal gave it a term of khudi. I mean, to have a trust in yourself. खुदी है खुद मर्द खुदागाह का जलाल और जमाल कि ये किताब है बाकी तमाम तफसीर. That self-awareness and self-esteem is basically the beauty and the grandeur of a person who is self-aware. Because this is the only book through which a person can develop. All the other books are its explanations. The only book is having your self-awareness and self-governance. Second is internalized moral perspective, that is self-governance. That under different circumstances, you will be exposed to disappointments. You will be exposed to situation in which there might be great pressure on you. There might be negative pressure on you. Your team member will be blaming you for many good things. But how do you govern yourself and how you have a strong internal moralized perspective of yourself and your values is really very important. If the results are not coming according to your expectations, then how do you govern yourself? This is the self-governance. It refers to self-regulatory process whereby individuals use their internal moral standards and values to guide their behavior rather than allow outside pressures to control them. It is self-regulatory process because people have control on the extent to which they allow others to influence them. Others see leaders with internalized moral perspective as authentic because their actions are consistent with their expressed belief in morals. And I'll give you a simple example. That, for example, if you are deciding the things on merit and justice, there might be the people in society, maybe in majority, not trusting you, and they may not be supporting you for your decision. Now, the question is should you change your way of decision making or you go by the standard or the moral, internal moral perspective you have developed based on definitely a very strong value system. So definitely the authentic leader and the people would like to see that how a person who has established some moral standards is believing in those moral standard for him or herself also. And that would definitely create the authentic leadership perspective. The third is your balance processing. It's again the perspective that how you regulate between the pressure, yourself, the people, the relationship, which are really very important. And this is basically in Islam we say that the main has been established on the balance, awsat, that neither you are very and last day I was listening to one of the hadith of the Holy Quran, Holy Prophet, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prefers that action which is balanced. I mean, any good deed which you do on a balanced way, in the sense that you don't expose on one side to a very high personal fatigue or pressure, and on the other side you are not taking it serious, so you will always create a balance between these two and would like to continue with that balance. And that is the balance processing, that while making the decisions you are trying to make a balance between the people. It also means avoiding favoritism about certain issues and remaining unbiased. So balance again would mean to remain unbiased. Relational transparency. This is really very important, and I think the more transparent you are, the more authentic you are. And transparency would mean that you are believing in the rule of law, first of all. And number two, all the decisions and the basis of your decision are publicly available to the people. And I think the transparency law of the country also in Pakistan also requires that all the decisions which you make must be available to the stakeholders, the rationale of that decision. And we have been trying in Karakoram University to be more public in our decisions. We try to reflect the merits, and we try to reflect uh, the uh, the merit list and also the final list of the contractors, so that the people can see their scoring. And if they have any observation or concern, they then can refer to the vice chancellor. So transparency relationship is very important, that the people must believe that you are doing a great job and you are following the merit and the justice. The, the another thing is intellectual stimulation, that the leaders would stimulate the follower to be creative. And we discussed this last time also, that one of the biggest challenge of the leaders is to make their followers creative and innovative. This type of leadership supports followers as they try new approaches to develop the innovative ways of dealing with organizational issues. And this is really very important in the 21st century, where we have a lot of challenges and we need the followers to come up with the creative and innovative solutions for the problems. An example of this type of leadership is a plant manager who promotes workers' individual efforts to develop unique ways to solve problems that have caused slowdown in the production. So you can think of many other environments in which the people would definitely like to put their innovative and creative solutions to the system. And as a leader, you need to pick these best solutions for the application. Now, how does it work? There is a lot of question about the validity of this model, because this relatively new model, which has been not for more than 1.5 decade. So we don't have enough evidence, empirical evidence, and the model itself is through evolution process. So the one in the jar educates that leaders become more purposeful, value-centered, relational, and self-disciplined and compassionate. We discussed this, the five very important elements of the jar authentic leadership model. Authentic works because leader demonstrates self-awareness, internalized moral perspective, balanced processing, and relational transparency. We discussed this. In addition, the literature suggests that positive psychological characteristics and moral reasoning have been a success significant impact on the authentic leaders. So this is again very important, that these authentic leadership is a complex process. This is not very easy to prove or to demonstrate the authenticity of your leadership in just one decision or just in a couple of years. It is a complex process that emphasizes the development of qualities that help the leaders to be perceived as trustworthy and believable by followers. So, definitely, the leader himself or herself would be going through a very long process. Maybe you take 5 or 4 decades or 3 decades of your life to become at that level in which you develop your own standards and values which are perceived to be the most authentic by the followers. And this may not be possible in just 1 or 2 days. The leader's job is to learn to develop these qualities and apply them to the common good as he or she serves others. So we discussed this, that you for a long time would try to learn these qualities, practice these qualities, and then maybe when I think at my life we had been learning for our mistakes, and gradually we are strengthening the value system, the merit system, and now, Alhamdulillah, we believe that some of these values can be very successfully practiced. Now, when we look at the strengths of this model, which is, I think, not very old, if we just look at last two decades, this has been used to analyze the failures of the public and private leadership, which has created distrust in people. In Pakistan, we had a very good or bad example of the poor governance, in which the leadership was challenged because of the lack of trustworthiness. The second, authentic leadership provides a broad guidelines for individuals who want to become authentic leaders. So it is kind of recipe also. We could see that there are 5 or 6 things which George has emphasized over to become the authentic leaders. The third, similar to the transformation and servant leadership, authentic leader has an explicit moral dimension. And again, this takes us to the Traitist approach, very close to the Traitist approach, that the moral dimension of this theory is very strong, that the leaders are identified by their very strong values. For authentic leadership, emphasize that authentic values and behaviors can be developed in leaders' work. And this is really very important. I would like to just take a few minutes on this. As a matter of fact, your life teaches you a lot of things. I would like to share with you that I started my life as a professional engineer from the NASPAC, where I spent in Lahore, Wabda House for 1 year, and I was a junior structural engineer. Then I was at the same time appointed by 3 departments through Public Service Commission and KP, then NWFP, in the CNW, in the Public Health, in the Small Hydel Development Organization, and maybe in the irrigation. So I preferred at that time to become part of the CNW, and then I joined the CNW department in 1989, and I worked there for 10 years. And then while I was working, then I was trying to learn the values and develop the values within myself. And after 10 years, then I realized that the system which CNW department is having by default is not easy for me to work, because there is apparently corruption. You can't insist on quality, can't insist on credibility. So then I decided to part way uh, with the CNW department. People definitely would call it that at that time was not a good decision. Many people, many of my friends, tried to insist on rethinking about it, but certainly I had a very clear patient, and the patient was to move out of a corrupt system. I joined Alama Iqbal Open University as a director, XN, and then director works in planning, and that was a very I think a very great part of my life, where I learned a lot of values, a lot of credibility. I had a very good system, and all the system was based on honesty, credibility. And then I tried to learn about. At that time, also there has been a lot of mistakes. I would not call that corruption, but certainly there has been a lot of mistakes. And during these mistakes, unfortunately, we uh, did some blunders also, to be very frank. But this was not deliberate, and we tried to learn. And then, Alhamdulillah, time came that we became very strong in values. And then I went to the City University's vice chancellor in the private sector for 4 years. That was a time when I learned a lot about how to emphasize yourself, and then joined Karakoram University in 2018. So what I mean to say that in the last almost 32 years of my career, all the time I was learning, and I was becoming more and more values oriented, because right from the beginning my passion was there to serve the society, number one, and at the same time creating some trustworthiness in the society. So therefore, you will be trying to learn over the years, and when you come in 40s and 50s, then you have a very strong value system. And unfortunately, the people who are not credible, they would still be in a same kind of vicious circle of trust and trustworthiness, and they would definitely be keeping corrupt till the end. Finally, authentic leadership can be measured. There is a authentic leadership questionnaire we will share with you that's comprising 16 items, and that will by the end of this lecture you can see your own authentic leadership score. Like all other theories, there were a lot of criticism. The first criticism was that it was not practically substantiated, that there was some very abstract kind of thinking and it was not applicable to the common circumstances. The second was that it is not fully explained, uh, implies that leaders are motivated by high order values such as justice. The way these values function to influence has not been given. We believe that these values are really important, but how do these values bring the change is really very important, and this has not been explained by the authors of this theory. Third, researchers have questioned whether positive psychological capacity should be included as a component of authentic leadership. Yes, this is a question whether the positive psychological capacity, self-awareness, self-governance is important for, and the later research in the second decade could validate that yes, the emotional intelligence and the things like emotional intelligence and all these are really very important. Finally, it's not clear how authentic leadership results in positive organizational outcome. Given that it is a new area of research, it's not unexpected that there are few data on outcome. These data are necessary to substantiate the value of the theory. It means that yes, we believe that authenticity of the leaders are very important, but do we think that all the people who are authentic can be good leaders in terms of their outcome or not? So this is a question which would certainly require further research. Yes, this is applicable to a lot of situations, like though it's in an early stage, but it can be utilized in organization. That it can be applied to organizations. Overriding goal of authentic is to try to do the right things, to be the honest with themselves and others, and to work for the common good, which I think is a very common notion of leadership. Last, authentic leadership is shaped and reformed by critical life events, and that acts as a trigger to growth in greater authenticity. So definitely, when you would like to see such kind of leaders, then the critical events of their lives are very important. This is a very interesting case study, and I would leave it to you that how the personal credibility is challenged. This is the Authentic Leadership Self-Assessment Questionnaire, ALS or ALQ, and I would leave it to these 16 questions. And I would request the audience to, before going to the results, they should gauge themselves first on this Likert model, for example. The highest score would always mean the high emphasis on that. For example, I can list my three greatest weaknesses. Yes, I strongly agree. So if I score myself, I may be getting 5. If I go to the next one, my actions reflect my core values. In my case, maybe I score myself 4. I seek others' opinion before making up my own mind. 4. I do, but maybe not to the biggest extent, greatest extent. I open share my feelings. Yes, I'm very I myself gauge as having this very good quality that I don't hide the feelings. I can list my three greatest strengths. Yes. Uh, I do not allow group pressure to control me. So you can just think about yourself. I listen closely to the ideas of those who disagree with me. I seek feedback. I let others know who I truly am as a person. So, how do you reflect and how you demonstrate your own value system and how the people are in a better position to know about your value system? I seek feedback is the way of understanding who I'm really as a person. That how you get the feedback from the people about your personality. Other people know where I stand on controversial issues. I do not emphasize my own point of view at expense of others. Uh, 12th, I rarely present a false front to others. I accept the feelings I have about myself. I accept the feeling I have about myself. My moral guides what I do as a leader. My moral guides me. I listen very carefully to the ideas of others and making decisions. I admit my mistake to others. So when you score it up, you can see if you sum of the question 159 and 13, 1, 5, 9 and 13, these are self-awareness. Uh, your self-awareness score, you can, your question answer to 2, 6, 10 and 14 are internalized moral perspective, which is the self-governance. Number 3, 7, 11 and 15, the four questions are balance processing, that how do you do justice and unbiased, you remain unbiased. And finally, the relationship transparency 4, 8, 12, and 16. So you sum up these scores, and if, for example, your score under each attribute is 16 to 20, then definitely you have a very high attribute of that. If you are low than 15 and below, then this is low. Score in the upper range indicates stronger authentic leadership, but a score in the lower, if the score is less than 15, then you are a weaker authentic leadership in that particular attribute. A summary, I would not go to the summary. You just these are some of the videos which I have uploaded from the YouTube, and you would go through it and see that how it is. These are the links which can be, there's some review question, and this is an assignment if you would like to, but there are a couple of very good paper from different good researchers about the authentic leadership in the world. You can read and you can see your own understanding of this leadership theory. So thank you very much